The year was 1974. I can't believe it was that long ago. And there's a memory that's etched in my mind, almost like a leech stuck to my skin. And that is, for those of you that may have been around and cognizant, back in 1974, in the autumn, there was the public release of a movie called The Poseidon Adventure. And it came off the big screen and was going to be shown on TV on a Sunday evening, and I think it was in October. And I received a phone call from my buddy that day, and the whole community was talking about the Poseidon Adventure. We lived very exciting lives back then. But having said that, he asked if I wanted to go rafting with him down the Patuxent River. Now, we were living adjacent to Fort Meade, Maryland. For those of you, do you know what happens at Fort Meade? It's the National Security Agency. NSA is there. They're the counterpart to the CIA. They do all the eavesdropping around the planet. And there's lots of areas on Fort Meade that are restricted access for a variety of reasons. Some of it is for security. And in some cases, there's other issues related to public safety where they prefer that the public stay out. And the upshot is, Mark asked me if I wanted to go rafting down the Patuxent River. And what he suggested is that we go to the northern part of the river on the north end of Fort Meade. We would get into the river there and then take it to the southern end where our parents would pick us up. So we had parent A dropped us off at the north end. And you have to understand, on Fort Meade, everything is kind of fenced off, but of course the river isn't fenced off. So we, being 16-year-old boys, we jumped into the river and went floating downstream. Sadly, we ran into a lot of log jams and never made it to our destination. And there were as this river winds its way through Fort Meade, it's all forested. There's no road access, there's nothing. So because much of the base is fenced off, and essentially nobody knew where we were. And so it got dark and we stopped. Being old Boy Scouts, we had wax-covered matches. Isn't that great, right? So we actually started a fire and sat on the riverbank and just thought that we would, cast off the next morning. As it turns out, Dave and Mark's, like Pee-wee's Great Adventure, Dave and Mark's Great Adventure, we started this fire along the river, not recognizing that we were in an area with unexploded ordnance from World War II. And so we didn't realize that this was actually a big to-do, that there were youngsters out there in this part of the base. A few hours after dark, a helicopter came over with a spotlight, and I can't embarrass myself publicly by giving you many more details, other than to say it was after midnight when we finally made it out of the forested area, escorted by the U.S. military and some fire department and some other players. And I can remember my mom, she clearly had been weeping. She was in a police car. And I remember walking up to the police car, she was waiting, and the first thing she said to me was, "What were you thinking about?" And I'm like, Mom, I'm a 16-year-old male. Do you really want to know the answer to that question? And she's like, "No, never mind." But having said that, that refrain has come back to me many, many times over the course of my career, and that is, what are you thinking about? I currently work in Washington, D.C. for the National Association of County and City Health Officials. We represent the 2,800 local health departments in the United States. And almost every conversation I'm involved in, people are asking, what are you thinking about? How are you framing this in your mind, this whatever it is we happen to be discussing, whether it's budget cuts, whether it's informatics, whether it's the practice of environmental health. And frankly, from a national perspective, environmental health is going through some very difficult times right now. And perhaps if you have an opportunity, I'll share some of those insights with you. But to kind of punt off this morning, what we'd like to do over the next 3 or 4 hours is to have a conversation. And I know oftentimes when folks attend these kinds of meetings, you like to sit in the back. I notice I must have cooties or something because everyone's in the back of the room, right? It just reminds me, being a preacher at church, all the pews in the back get filled up before people move up front. But having said that, we're going to be asking some questions, and we're hoping as the morning progresses that you'll be willing to share your perspectives and thoughts and considerations on some of the material that you're being exposed to. The PowerPoint presentation you don't have in paper copy in your hands. I have it on a flashcard. Of course, it'll be available on the website, the Cooper website, after this. But if you'd like to take a version of this home with you today and you have a computer, I'd be happy to either A, lend you the flashcard or flashcard, or B, if you give me your email address, I'll email it to you later today. Okay, so what I really hope that you would do is follow in the conversation, think about the material that's being presented, and let's see if we can't bring our kind of thinking to a new level by the end of the program today. We're going to break this out in 2 different segments. I understand that there is a coffee break at 10 o'clock, and so what we'll do over the first couple of hours is talk about framing what it is, why it's important, and some of the issues related to us as environmental health professionals as we frame out the kinds of conversations and the thought processes that affect us each and every day. The second half, from 10:15 to noon, we'll specifically drill down into critical thinking, what it is not, and the kinds of things we need to think about as we have Coupa-related work, and ways that we perhaps can reframe and rethink the way that we do business. And so to get our brains going, I'd like to engage you early on. And I understand that some of you are caffeinated this morning. Some of you may not be caffeinated this morning. Some of you are using the right side of your brain. Some of you are using the left side of your brain. And I hope you just join me for a moment in going through some exercises that are intended to get your right brain talking to your left brain and vice versa. And these methods that I'm about to share with you are participatory. That is, you have to get involved, or I would encourage you to get involved. And this has been quantitatively, for those doubters in the room, these methods have been quantitatively proven to provide the results of getting people in a frame of mind where they can think creatively. So the first thing I would like you to do, and you can do this from your seats, is to take your thumb and extend it out in front of you. And I would like you to make like a sideways 8 and follow the 8 with your eyes, and do that 3 times without getting dizzy. All right. Now, when you're done with that, take your other hand and repeat the process going in the opposite direction. All right. And when you're done with that, I'd like you to clasp your hands in front of you. And 3 times, again with your eyes following, make the lazy 8. Now I'm told this is more fun with reggae music. Sorry I couldn't get Bob Marley before. Okay, so hopefully your brain is feeling a little more engaged at this time. Now here's one that's very interesting. It's called hunting the bunny. So you have bunny ears, right? And what do bunnies do? They go up and down, right? And we're going to hunt the bunny, but you have to shoot the bunny. And so take one hand to make a pistol, take the other hand, and the bunny needs to go up and down while the gun follows it, without the gun going up and down. And when you get all the way to one side, then turn around and do it again. And see, I'm even screwing myself up. Okay. All right, let's try that one more time now. Anyone having difficulty with that?
David, I didn't tell you that I can't tell my right from my left.
Okay,
so this is like really.
All right, and this last one I'd like you to try. Hopefully you've got a piece of paper. Yeah, I can see this gentleman in the back is still giving it a go. I appreciate your enthusiasm. The last one I want you to try is, if you've got 2 pens with you, or two writing utensils there, I want you to write on a piece of paper simultaneously. Write your first name the way you normally do it. Like my name is David, so I would write D-A-V-I-D. And then with your other hand, while you're writing with the first hand, write your name in a mirror image. So it would be a mirror image from right to left, and then the normal way from left to right. And see if you can, if you don't have 2 pens, try to do it in front of you. But just see if you can write your name in mirror images on a sheet of paper in front of you, and tell me how that works for you. So I think it would be. And David is actually pretty easy, right? Because you can't screw up the V's. For those of you that are writing, how did that work? Look like chicken scratch? All right, and and we'll leave it at that. So those are some exercises that are intended to get your right brain to speak to your left brain.
All right, so first of all, without saying something, because anything that we have you say, it would be helpful for purposes of taping for us to have you speak here, but without saying it out loud right now, just look at the picture and in your own mind, what do you see? Okay, and then I'm gonna see if some people will volunteer to tell me what they see. What do you see? Okay, what do you see?
A rabbit.
What did you see?
A duck.
Okay,
The head of a bird.
okay. Anybody else see anything? Okay, how many rabbits did we see? How many rabbits? How many ducks? So, and how many other things besides rabbits and ducks? Okay, so now it was interesting because David did a rabbit exercise. I was kind of wondering whether we might see more rabbits this time, just because we were shooting them earlier, you know. Now, how many people can see both a rabbit and a duck now? How many people, now, did you see, if you didn't see the rabbit and duck the first time, but you can see it now, did that happen to anybody here? Okay, so some people didn't see the other one the first time, but having been suggested that you can see something else there, now can you see? You can see that other image now that it's been suggested that that image is in there somewhere. So that's one way in which we can, by suggestion that there's another image there, you can actually find it in there. We're going to be visiting today some concepts about looking at things more than one way. In our profession, it's necessary to see many, many different perspectives because as Koopas, we have many, many different customers, right? We've got regulated facilities, we've got concerned environmental customers, we've got the future generations, we've got political representatives. So we have customers who have many, many different perspectives on things. So we don't really have the luxury of seeing only the rabbit or only the duck. We have to be able to see as many perspectives as our minds will open up to. And so we're hoping today that the different perspectives that maybe we can offer up will offer some tools, some of which will probably resonate more with you and some less. So we ask that you keep your mind open to those things that might be helpful to you today as we go through this exercise.
Okay, so let's begin this morning by talking about framing and what it is and what it is not. Framing addresses how people think, and more specifically, how you think and how you process information when you are presented with data, with circumstances, and with conditions. Frames really are organizing principles that are socially shared and persistent over time. And you know, it's fascinating. If you think of the word yard, think about that for a moment. What comes to mind? For some of you, it'll be where you bring your dog out back behind the house, right? It can also be what? A unit of measure, depending on where your head is at. What are some other interpretations of yard? Like Scotland Yard, right, out in the UK. And one of my favorite ones was many years ago, I was on a nationwide assessment of cement manufacturing facilities. And they have a custom there of putting old used equipment in a bone yard. Had you heard of that term? And I remember encountering a lot of asbestos and a lot of PCBs and transformers that were simply being stored in places, including in this state, to be honest with you, stored out in the back 40, if you will. And so when everyone's talked about a yard, my first visual image was that of a boneyard, but my guess is that it's not the usual and customary kinds of way of thinking about things. When you see a picture, you process that information in a way that is unique to your culture, your family, your life history. And what we would like to do is have you think about your own individual frames. How is it that you process information? How do you think about the stuff that impacts you and at work on a day-to-day basis? Why does this matter? Well, it matters because the perceptions of what you do at work and how you process information is shaped by your core beliefs. And I'm not necessarily talking about spirituality here. I'm talking about what you believe to be a value or a principle that you live by. And when you're exposed to new data and new information, you need to recognize that that's washed through the lens of your life. And that the people that you're talking to and trying to convince to do things, they are processing information through the lens of their life. They are framing what you're telling them in a way that they understand and can cope with. Now, we're going to get into specific illustrations in case this seems kind of vague in just a few minutes. When people are challenged with new information, whether it's a foreign term related to hazardous materials management or something to do with environmental health, they always revert to their comfortable frame, what they are familiar with. And as we process information and we try to convey information, we need to recognize our own personal frames and the frames of the people that we work with. There are a couple or three concepts I would like you to just think about here for a moment. The first one is the idea of identity affirmation. Individuals affirmatively process information consistent with their cultural values. And if you think about your own lives and your own communities, maybe you can bring some of those to mind. As we hear individuals talk and convey information to us, we are more likely to accept information if the person conveying that information portrays that they understand and respect and inculcate diverse values. Now, I want you to stop and think about what's happening with the Republican race right now. Do most people within the United States, for example, see Newt Gingrich or Ron Paul as candidates that embrace diverse value sets? Now, I'm not turning this into a presidential debate kind of thing today. That's not my aim. I'm just trying to use a popular and contemporary illustration. But I think most folks would say, those guys are way right of center, right? They maybe don't represent the values that I hold near and dear to my heart. For example, equity. What did Mitt Romney say this last week? Oh, we have safety nets for the poor, right? My interest is in the middle class. Right? So for some of us who are very interested in health equity, our frame or my frame is like, wait a second, I'm processing that as an outrage, that statement. Where other folks with a different frame is like, no, what he's saying makes sense. There's safety nets for the poor. We need to take care of the middle class. And I hope that kind of brings some of this, brings this closer to home for you. So as we convey information, and then we're going to come back to this pluralistic advocacy piece. When you convey information or convey data or try to make your case, you need to understand that individuals that are listening to you are asking themselves the question, does this person represent a balanced view and is open to different types of value sets? Because if you take an extreme position, either on the right or the left, you're immediately going to be shutting down an audience. They are thinking about you differently than the way that you're thinking about yourself. You're trying to make a strong case, right? But what your audience or what your customers or your constituency is thinking, they're thinking that you're an extreme person. Where here you're thinking that, in fact, you're trying to make the strongest case possible. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't make a strong case. You should. But the way you frame that information is really important to your success. And whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you're at a public meeting, you need to keep these kinds of issues in the back of your mind at all times. We make mental shortcuts that help us make sense of what goes on around us all the time. I was speaking up here in the Bay Area a few years ago, and I was cut off. I was driving to give a presentation. I was cut off by a pickup truck. And I was really upset. Have you ever been cut off on the freeway? Of course you have, right? So what immediately goes through your mind? What's your frame? That jackass, right? Okay, so here, I was really upset. It's like this guy cut me off, and he's screaming down the road, and being a testosterone-laden male, I was just, driving up on his bumper, giving him a hard. So what does the guy do? He turns left into an emergency room at a hospital, right? You see what my frame did to me? It I completely misjudged what was going on simply because of my frame of mind. And I hope that, so these mental shortcuts that we take when we encounter situations can be really important. Now, what's critical for us, and we're going to get to this in more detail in just a moment, are these concepts of dominant frames. What are the major frames that affect us? And we're going to see a short film clip here put on by Frameworks, which is going to shine a spotlight on environmental health and how our public sees us and how we see ourselves through a dominant frame, or these major frames. And we just need to recognize that these dominant frames exist. And one of the things I wish I had learned in grad school early on is that no matter how many facts I have necessarily, that won't affect an individual's understanding of what I'm trying to tell them or how I'm trying to convince them to act, whether it's don't go to the boneyard because there's PCBs there, or to keep my son from drinking and driving. It's not fact-based. People understand facts very well. It's the way they process that information and their understanding of it, which is absolutely critical. And at the same time, we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves the questions. We know that this isn't healthy for us, but we still do it, right? It's not the fact, it's the way that we process that and our understanding of how that might affect us. All right, so dominant frames are our habits of thought. They establish a foundation for everything that we do, everything that we hear, everything that we see, we're processing through some frame. And there's also a cultural perspective on this as well. As you heard through my introduction, I've been blessed to have worked in many, many different countries. And the cultural overlay of this cannot be overstated. And being right here in California, how many languages are spoken here? Is it 50 or 60? I mean, it's some amazing amount. So the cultural perspective in our success as inspectors, as environmental health professionals, as public health professionals needs to be seen through a cultural lens. I'm now going to show a 14.5-minute video clip. I did not put this together. An organization in Washington, D.C., Frameworks, put this together, and they tried to answer the question, what are the dominant frames related to environmental health? Why is it folks don't understand us very well? Would you agree with that? I mean, I hear out of NCEH, the National Center for Environmental Health, we are the invisible profession, right? Do you know that this year, here in just the last few weeks, the lead program at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control was zeroed out. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It went from $36 million to $2 million. Okay, it was not zeroed out. I misspoke. What contaminant do we know more about on this planet than lead? What are we thinking about from a public health perspective, right? And so as we think about how poor of a job we've done in framing out just how critical lead is to us. And what is the action level now for childhood blood lead? Was it 10 micrograms per deciliter of blood, right, is the action level? There's a scientific advisory board that's recommending, as we now speak, that be cut in half. And at the same time, we virtually zero out the lead prevention budget through the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. Some things just don't make sense. So we need to understand just how the world sees us and how we see it. So give me just a moment to boot up this film clip again.